I'm Chris Alexander, 8th generation Mesillero, and I'd like to welcome you to join us on our short tour of history.
My name is Lionel Fritzy, and I'm here to welcome you to our community where we are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the signing of El Tratado de la Mesilla, or as is known as the Gadsen Purchase, where the property where our community sits was turned over from the Mexican government to the U.S. government.
Una proclamación, Tratado de la Mesilla, que habiéndose concluido y firmado en esta capital.
A proclamation, whereas a treaty between the United States of America and the Mexican Republic was concluded and signed in Mexico City on the 30th day of December, 1853, which treaty, as amended by the Senate of the United States and being in the English and Spanish languages, is word for word as follows. In the name of Almighty God.
This should be something that's a point in history to where the disputed lands between Mexico and the United States came to some closure for the settlement of the disputed Mesilla strip of land becoming part of the United States. And so in essence, that was our birth into the United States.
From the book, A Place as Wild as the West Ever Was, by Mary Daniels Taylor. When the American and Mexican people of Doña Ana received lands in Mesilla in 1850, the number of Americans among them had increased. Discharged soldiers, traders, and teamsters, and they joined some of the others in sending a petition to the governor at Santa Fe in 1851. They stated flatly that it was their understanding when they moved to Mesilla that it was under the jurisdiction of the United States.
Mesilla is a border town, but a century and a half ago there were serious questions about whether Mesilla was on the Mexican or the United States side of that border. The Mexican-American War had just ended, with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the creation of new borders between the two nations.
Well, we have to go back to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo to end the Mexican-U.S. War. That's when Mexico deeded most of the Southwest to the United States. When they drew the maps that were included in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the surveyor made an error which was not discovered until some years later. And at that point in time, that's when the actions were taken to incorporate that area that was left out of that treaty into the United States.
In 1853, newly elected U.S. President Franklin Pierce set his sights on resolving the border confusion by claiming the disputed strip of land for America. Pierce sent a delegation to Mexico City to work out a deal with the government of Mexican President Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna.
The delegation was headed from the U.S. by James Gadsen, and the Mexican delegation was Manuel Díaz Bonilla, José Salazar Hilarique, José Moreno Montenerdo, and they were the individuals that actually signed El Tratado de la Mesilla, which in this area we know it as the Gadsen Purchase. And I don't believe that Mexico nor the U.S. wanted to go to war again for about 43,000 acres, which is what the El Tratado de la Mesilla encompassed. It was signed in Mexico City in December the 30th of 1853. They had a celebration of sorts in La Mesilla later on, and that was what we are now celebrating, the 150th, is the ratification of that treaty. The ratification entails the changing of power. Basically, the Mexican contingency lowered their flag, and the U.S. contingency raised the American flag to take possession of the territory.
Shoulder arms!
La Mesilla was the biggest community in the area. That's why they call it El Tratado de la Mesilla. There were very few small communities. However, in La Mesilla, the population in 1850 was about 2,500, which was a big metropolis as far as the time frame goes.
Again, Mary Daniels Taylor. On November 14th, General Garland ordered Colonel Dixon Miles to proceed to the town of Mesilla with a part of the garrison of Fort Fillmore and there hoist the national flag at noon of this day. Following reveille on the 15th, Companies A and E and the band of the 3rd United States Infantry, Company B of the 1st Dragoons, and a small detail with 2 mountain howitzers, all in full dress, marched from Fort Fillmore toward Mesilla. The cavalry forded the river, the infantry crossed by ferry.
There were 3,000 people living in the village at this time, and many of them were there quietly waiting for the ceremonies to begin. Some thought they were citizens of Mexico. All would become American citizens unless, before 1 year had passed, they departed into their Mexican homeland.
A flutter of drums and the Mexican flag came down to be folded away by loving hands. The American standard was run up over the tops of the cottonwood trees, an event celebrated annually even today. La inauguración de la bandera, the hoisting of the flag.
General Garland rose from behind the treaty table to read his proclamation, which concluded thus: "For the information of all concerned, it is hereby made known that our national flag will give protection to all persons who properly seek it."
Attention, company. Shoulder, forward.
I'm not sure what the advantages or disadvantages were. I know that the government, Mexican government, did not want to go to war for it. The U.S. government, I'm sure, didn't want to go to war either. And I think it was a convenience. There was money traded, exchanged for it, something like $10 million.
Artículo 3. En consideración a las
Article
anteriores
3. In
estipulaciones.
consideration of the foregoing stipulations, the government of the United States agrees to pay to the government of Mexico in the city of New York the sum of $10 million.
Santa Anna's government was hurting financially, so the Gadsen purchase encompassed much more than the disputed strip that included Mesilla. For $10 million, the U.S. added what is now the southern edge of New Mexico and what is now the southern third of Arizona. This was roughly 30,000 square miles, purchased at a price of about 52 cents per acre.
But $10 million at that point in time was, all things considered, a very good bargain for the U.S. What was given at the time as a reason for it was for the railroad to be able to go from Franklin, which is now El Paso, down all the way to the west coast around San Diego. Our ancestors, I guess we can look at it both ways, whether they were right or wrong. They decided they did not want the railroad to go in our backyard. And there are different reasons for that, because some people say that they didn't want chickens, the chickens wouldn't lay, the cows wouldn't get milk, and various little stories about it. And therefore they came towards Las Cruces, to where the railroad is now. And that in itself kind of killed the commerce in La Mesilla. It has changed it in such a way that we have been able to maintain some of the ambience or the peacefulness that goes with a small community that's basically has been able to retain its historical significance. A celebration has always been needed. We all celebrate a birthday, we celebrate an anniversary, and this one is one that has been neglected. It is part of our history and our culture. And when you talk about La Mesilla, which later becomes Mesilla, and to some newer generations, it's all Mesilla. It's even further lost because they don't know where it's really at. And I think it's behooves all of us to make sure that they realize the importance of this action that was taken back in 1853.